We have plenty of seats for those who are still standing in the back. All right. Welcome. Good morning to all of you. Good morning. We're thrilled that you're here. We have an echo with our audio. We can minimize that. My name is Emily Breslin. I'm the Deputy Director of Communications and External Affairs for the Strategic Council. Still need to address that echo. Before we get underway here, can I ask you to turn to someone you don't know and introduce yourself? I'm going to give you 45 seconds for that. Is that enough time? Are we introduced? All right. Can we crank the audio up? That's it? Okay. Waterfall.
Testing.
Okay. Can I please have your attention? Thank you. We're going with the echoey mic. Okay. Well, that went really well. Fortunately, we have many more opportunities to get to know one another today. So I have a few housekeeping items, if we can throw that slide up before we get started here. All right, so I've been asked a number of times where the bathrooms are. First floor, there are bathrooms close to the cafeteria. Those do not require a code. The upstairs bathroom requires the code that's on the screen. Please take a photo of that. There are also handy dandy signs with the bathroom codes for the upstairs level 2 bathrooms. Wi-Fi is CNRA guest. It does not require a password for those of you that need to hop onto the internet. Our afternoon breakout sessions, those opportunities to get to know one another more than we just did, are going to be held on the second floor. Our conference relies quite a bit on our app, Huva. So if you can make sure that you have that downloaded on your phone, that's going to provide you the information you need in terms of where you're being placed in your breakout room. So make sure to explore that. If you have any questions, anyone wearing an SGC Catalyst conference shirt can help you out, especially those folks who are stationed up at the front for registration. So make sure to do that. We're going to have an opportunity to test out Huva in just a sec. If you need to answer emails, you need to meet with someone here. The Poppy Pavilion, which is behind you, is available to you for the next 2 days. It's a really lovely working space. So do avail of that if you need any downtime. I would be remiss if I didn't mention our hashtag for the conference. That's Catalyst Conversation. If you do post to social media, and I would appreciate that, please use that hashtag so that we can follow along. Okay, so lastly, we're going to test out Huva. So if you can all pull out your phones, hopefully you have it downloaded. We're going to try a poll here. Throughout the next 2 days, there's going to be a lot of interactivity with our audience. We want to make sure that we've done a dry run on this before we use it full scale. All right. So our question to you is, how are you this morning? The poll has just launched. You should either, one, receive a push notification. And if you haven't received the push notification, you're going to go to the lower right-hand side of your app and you're going to click polls, messages, then polls, and then answer poll that was just launched. And if that's too complicated, we won't see any answers on the screen. Oh, okay, that's fun. Pumped, amazing, peachy. Great and excited to be here. Sleepy, but excited. Yeah, I think all of the conference organizers are feeling kind of sleepy. Energized, fabulous, caffeinated. Excellent. Spoonfuls of sugar here. Okay. Well, that's pretty chirpy. All right. So that's it for me. Thanks for being here. I'm going to pass it over to our executive director, Lynn von Koch-Liebert, who is going to open us up and welcome you all. Thanks so much.
Good morning. Good morning. It is so wonderful to be with you this morning. Before we start, we'd like to take a moment and invite SGC colleague Jessica McCool, who is a member of the Sama Chumash tribe, to start with the land acknowledgement.
All right, I got a mic for this, so testing. All right. Thank you, Lynn. Hakuyila, Kashua Sukin, Kashua Paktina, Kakinalan. Maktaka Jessica McCool, Kalap Alahuna Puni Samala Chumash, Kashua Katuk Iti. Hello all, good morning. Welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Jessica McCool and I'm Samala from San Ynez. I'm happy to be here. I use she, her pronouns and am a program associate for the Community Resilience Centers program with the California Strategic Growth Council. We have a very exciting next couple of days planned, but before anything else, I wanted to start us off in a good way. So in my culture, before we start our ceremonies or gatherings, it's important to smudge or cleanse ourselves and the spaces around us. We do this using plant medicines, the most common being white sage or hapshuk. We burn it and cover ourselves with the smoke to bring our minds, hearts, bodies, and spirits into a good space to enter ceremony or gathering. Although many tribes and nations now use white sage for smudging, it is important to remember that each tribe and nation has its own sets of practices and protocols that is specific to their community. In my Samala Chumash culture, we traditionally smudge using coastal sage or weiwei and water. We soak it in the water and cleanse ourselves with it. Now, I wanted to briefly go over what a land acknowledgement is, why they're important, and offer suggestions for how to create your own that is respectfully and culturally appropriate. All of the information I'm about to share was pulled from a land acknowledgement guide that my Chumash relative, Felicia Garcia, actually created during her time at NYU, where she received her master's in museum studies. So what is an Indigenous land or territorial acknowledgement? It is a statement that recognizes the Indigenous peoples who have been dispossessed from the homelands and territories upon which an institution was built and currently occupies and operates in. For some, an Indigenous land or territorial acknowledgement might be an unfamiliar practice, but it is common protocol within Indigenous communities in the US and standard practice in both Australia and Canada as well. The terms land and territorial are not necessarily interchangeable, and the decision as to their use should be specific and local, pertaining to those Indigenous people who are being acknowledged, as well as those legacies and responsibilities of an institution that are also being acknowledged. Within cultural institutions, these statements can be adopted in various ways. However, it is vital that they be spoken as a verbal statement given at the beginning of programs or events. In addition, they can also be expressed through a text panel or plaque or an acknowledgement on an institutional website. So why are these important? The teaching of US history in schools, museums, and the media has left out many voices and difficult truths in order to create an idealized nationalistic identity. The displacement of Indigenous peoples and the devastating effect that forced relocation has had on these communities has been largely hidden within the nationalist narratives. While many Indigenous nations have treaties with the US government that designate land ownership, most only have rights to occupancy. Often the land on which Indigenous nations and communities reside is not the land to which they have ancestral ties, as many have experienced dispossession and displacement through colonization. However, the connection to homelands has endured by means of multiple and ongoing Indigenous strategies of resistance and resilience to settler colonialism. This connection is often central to cultural identity and worldview. The settler colonial state continues to struggle in the recognition of inherent Indigenous sovereignty and respect for homelands. So what are some suggestions for creating your land or territorial acknowledgement? They should be motivated by a genuine respect for Indigenous nations and communities. Reaching out to local Indigenous communities to ask how they would like to be acknowledged is crucial. This is the most respectful approach, as it recognizes the sovereignty of Indigenous nations to define their own terms. Acknowledgements are a collaborative process to be formed through continuous relationships with Indigenous people. An acknowledgement begins as a spoken embodied action. It is also appropriate for institutions to adopt materials like a plaque or text panel. This practice should be integrated by institutional staff into the protocol of everyday proceedings, such as board meetings, gallery talks, and larger events like today's. It is important and meaningful to have institutional representatives acknowledge the institution's legacy and to indicate reckoning and a commitment to change within the institution. That being said, land or territorial acknowledgement statements can take many forms. Unfortunately, the chairman of the Nisenan tribe here in Sacramento is no longer able to join us, but I would love to share one with you today. We are gathered on the unceded land of the Nisenan peoples. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Nisenan community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. The California Strategic Growth Council also acknowledges that it was founded upon exclusions and erasures of many Indigenous peoples, including those on whose land this institution is located. This acknowledgement demonstrates a commitment to continue the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. In addition to this land acknowledgement, I also wanted to offer a blessing, but first want to recognize the elders and other tribal members in this room today and give them the opportunity to share a prayer blessing first if they would like. So at this time, if you would like to offer, please stand. And if not, I would love to share one. All right, I'll go ahead. If you could all please stand with me. No halakwel, kiakinash echapsi, kiakinash echma kielesmon, kiakinash echma ki iskan, na ki apanush, Tani Shushkali, Oyanota Kulukina Chayashacho. Creator, thank you for this day. Thank you for bringing us together. Thank you for our families and our communities. Please make us strong and help us stay on a good path. Oh, Kakinash, thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jess. We really appreciate the land acknowledgement as well as you sharing your history with us here today. Now, before I start, we have a number of folks who are standing in the back. So if you have an empty seat next to you, raise your hand. And then I just welcome folks to come on in. Okay. Well, good morning, good morning. As was mentioned earlier, my name is Lynn Von Koch-Liebert, and I am the Executive Director of the California Strategic Growth Council. And we are, yes, thank you. Yes. And we are a 10-member council agency comprised of 7 state agencies and 3 public members. And we have the mission to build healthy, thriving, and resilient communities. And on behalf of the Strategic Growth Council and the SGC team, I would like to welcome you to our inaugural Catalyst Conference, which has been developed in partnership with the Milken Institute. So thank you all for being here today. I would also like to acknowledge and recognize Vice Chairman Brian McDonald of the Chemehuevi Indian Tribe. And I would also like to recognize that we're joined by the following tribal nations today: Bishop Paiute, Blue Lake Rancheria, Chicken Ranch Rancheria, Fernando Tatavian Band of Mission Indians, Hoopa Valley Tribe, Karuk Tribe, Middletown Ranchera of Pomona Indians, Pala Band of Mission Indians, Santa Isabel Camille, Yavanga Community, and the Torres Martinez Desert Quilla Indians. Thank you for being here. I would also like to welcome our elected leaders who are here with us as well. Welcome LA Deputy Mayor of Public Works, Randall Winston, Mayor of Emeryville, John Bouters, Mayor of Indio, Oscar Ortiz, Yolo County Supervisor, Lucas Precious, Sacramento County Supervisor, Patrick Kennedy, City of East Alto City Council Member, Ruben Arbica, City of Oakland Council Member, Dan Kalm, City of Coachella Council Member, Stephanie Vergen. And I would also like to thank Secretary Wade Crowfoot of the Natural Resources Agency for inviting us into this beautiful space for the conference. We chose this space because of the purposeful connection to the natural environment that it brings as you go through the walk through these halls. So we hope that today, while we're inside and tomorrow we're inside, it helps us continue to have that connection to the world around us. I'd also like to thank the Milken Institute for the thought partnership in the development of this event. Incredible partnership over the last couple of months to really think through and organize, bringing everybody here together today for this conversation. And also, I'd like to thank our 18-person steering committee, which represents leaders across diverse sectors and communities, and who we've relied on over the last couple of months as we've really thought through the purpose and the intention behind this event. And I also have immense gratitude for our sponsors: the James Irvine Foundation, Dream for All, California Endowment, Blue Shield of California Foundation, Meta, Southern California Edison, ARUP, and the Southern California Association of Governments. Thank you for making it possible for us to gather here today. Okay, well, let's take a moment now and see who we have in the participating today. So under your chairs, you all should have yellow placards. And this is borrowing from a tradition and a strategy that comes from a lot of community groups. So I'll ask when I call out a group, just raise your placard and let's see who we have here. Okay, so if you are part of local government, please raise your placard. All right, state government. Great. Federal government. Some tribal governments, tribal representatives. Welcome. Community leaders and community-based organizations. Great. Funders and philanthropy. Okay. All right, private sector partners. Advocacy and academia. Great. And those who are in California. Right. And those who are joining us from outside of California. All right, welcome. Thank you all for being here. All right. Okay. So we are gathered here today because we have a once in a generation opportunity where we have unprecedented state and federal funding directed towards infrastructure, the built environment, and climate initiatives. We also have the Justice 40 initiative from the Biden-Harris administration, calling for at least 40% of overall investments from certain federal programs to be delivered in disadvantaged communities. Here in California, Governor Gavin Newsom's Executive Order 1622 also directs state agencies and departments to explicitly embed equity in missions, programs, and policies. So we have the political will, and we have the funds to be transformative and to achieve equitable investments and outcomes for communities who face disinvestment, environmental justice, or direct harmful actions. I know that personally, 20 years from now, I think it's safe to say that we would all want to look back and say that we met this moment by galvanizing a movement. We do not want to look back and say that we lost the opportunity, or worse, that we perpetuated harm. With this in mind, we've come here today, brought together by the guiding question: how do we invest differently for equitable outcomes in communities facing historic disinvestment and the first and worst effects of climate change and longstanding legacy pollution? Our goal today and tomorrow is to have an action-oriented conversation that yield the following outcomes. First, hearing directly from community leaders and tribal leaders about grounding examples in their communities, about why we need new approaches to community investment and development and the paths forward. Second, identifying specific barriers to access and implementation within under-resourced communities and specifically within the tribal context. And third, exploring and co-creating opportunities to implement Justice 40, including community-informed action criteria around procurement, workforce development, engagement, finance, systems of accountability, and ensuring that community is invited to and stays at the table throughout the whole process. The outcomes of this conversation will inform SGC's multi-billion-dollar program, as well as be summarized in impact summary papers that will be shared with our council, the governor's office, the legislature, federal agencies, and made publicly available. This will be done at a time when we head into a new state legislative cycle, as the state continues to coordinate funding coming through the Infrastructure Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, and as federal agencies design their program guidelines over the next several months. We're also having this conversation as philanthropy continues to play a critical role in early and targeted investment, and as the private sector and private finance are increasingly becoming part of the green economy and future. Now, since 2008, SGC has invested over $3 billion, of which more than 75% has gone into disadvantaged and underserved communities. And over the past few years, we have made progress towards making meaningful investments in California Native American nations and tribal communities. And while we will kick off a number of our conversations with sharing SGC's learning from this work, we have designed this convening to think beyond SGC to a whole of California and well beyond, to identify the gaps, existing tools, and the solutions that already are working, as well as to carve new paths forward. And when we leave this setting, our hope is that you walk away inspired, more connected, and ready to take action. Now, before closing, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the senseless violence against Tyree Nichols, a 29-year-old Black man from Memphis, Tennessee, who died after being pulled over by police at a traffic stop. And last week in California, we experienced mass shootings in Los Angeles and Half Moon Bay in the span of just 48 hours. Today, we're having a conversation about the need to lift up and intentionally support communities after decades of purposeful disinvestment and direct harmful action, which has resulted in glaring disparities in opportunity and outcomes in needless violence. Whether we're talking about modes of community development and investment or systems of law enforcement, the only justice is change. And for us to grow out of old cycles and broken systems, to learn from one another, and to sometimes have challenging conversations. To get to meaningful growth, we must take these actions. I'd like to take a moment of silence for these victims, their families, and communities. Thank you. Now, unquestionably, everything that I've laid out this morning, this is hard. This is hard work. And over the next 2 days, There's no way we're going to be able to solve or even address all the items we need to discuss. But our goal is that this convening will help bright light work that is already happening and it's already underway, and to form ideas and partnerships about next steps that we can all take together. Now, yesterday, my colleague Bo Chung, he said something that stuck with me. He said, our work on addressing climate change and supporting healthy, resilient communities takes left from your left brain, your right brain, and your heart. And so that's been sitting with me all morning. And so when I think about what that means to me, I'm thinking about helping us set intentions for the next 2 days. There are a couple things that I would like us all to be thinking about. The first is about being present and be open to sharing and listening. Also be mindful that we all come from diverse, rich, and lived experiences, and ask questions, see what points of view, and build bridges. And I'd ask that we all draw from respective experiences and work to think about how those solutions can help your work, but also a broader and multi-decade time horizon. And then be candid and be bold. Our note takers will be there capturing information, but they're not going to be capturing names. So, be candid, be bold. And I think importantly, have fun. It's so wonderful to meet new people. It's incredible to be back together in person. And I think that this is just an opportunity to be together working towards big, bold solutions. So let's roll up our sleeves. Let's have a great 2 days. And before we get to that work, I'm very pleased to share a video message from California Governor Gavin Newsom.
Hey everybody, it's Governor Gavin Newsom here, and I just want to thank you. Thank you all for being here, and moreover, thank you for your commitment, your faith and devotion to building more equitable partnerships that are foundational in tackling this climate crisis. This conference is about solutions. That's why I like this conference. Not about just identifying the problem, but solutions, and solutions that importantly work for everyone. And if there's one thing that you can say about California, it's what we do best: growth and inclusion. We pride ourselves on being on a leading and cutting edge, particularly as it relates to low carbon green growth. The good news, though, is over the last few years, we don't feel like we're all alone anymore. The state and its historic partnerships that we've advanced, and leadership that is well defined, now has a new partner, our federal partners. They have laid a sturdy foundation for all of us to build on. The federal government has provided historic, unprecedented funding and opportunities to support so much of your good work and support thriving and equitable and healthy communities in the process. Just think about the Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act that are sending billions and billions of dollars into our diverse communities across the state. Here in our state, over half of our climate investments from the cap and trade program, as an example, have benefited priority populations, delivering affordable housing, accessible transit, pollution reduction, and obviously so much more. Last year, and I hope you recognize what kind of work we did together, we committed California to the most robust, comprehensive climate action in the history of this nation, history of our state, to tackle not just the climate crisis, but also to lead by example and enact new world-leading measures, by the way, that included historic investments focused on equity and opportunity for all Californians. In that commitment and in those partnerships that we formed, particularly those with the legislature, we established clear, legally binding goals to achieve statewide carbon neutrality no later than 2045. We passed legislation establishing a goal of 90% clean energy by 2035, ensuring communities are protected from the harmful effects of pollution, particularly oil drilling. Through an executive order, we've also embedded equity into every mission, every program and policy statewide, working to address existing disparities and create equal outcomes, at least opportunities for equal outcomes for all Californians. All this to say that, California likes to lead, like to be bold. We love ambitious goals, but we back those goals with ambitious plans. And now we have an opportunity to put all of this in action. And that's the key. It's successful implementation that matters. It's about manifesting our ideals. And it's about, at the end of the day, localism. There's no substitute for partnership, cooperation, and local leadership. Communities, you are in the driver's seat on our climate solutions. And of course, so many of you here representing tribal nations and your representatives across the spectrum, a whole government approach, local, state, federal, and tribal leaders working together. Look, we all share one thing in common, not just a desire to work together across our differences, but a need and desire, for a better future, one where all our kids can, breathe clean air, enjoy our mutuality, our commonality, and that's our unprecedented and extraordinary resources. And so your presence here today gives us hope. It renews our faith again in devotion to the cause that unites each and every one of us, and look forward as a consequence of all of your ambition and all of your good work. I look forward to seeing what more you come up with.
Great. Well, I couldn't have said it more clearly myself. So thanks for the patience with the audio. We're really good at granting money, not as good at audio visuals. All right, great. Well, at this point, I am really excited to welcome Randall Winston and Keita Price to join me on stage. So Randall Winston has just been named Deputy Mayor Public Works for the city of Los Angeles, and he will be leading the mayor's infrastructure policy and aligning public works with community safety efforts. He is also a former executive director of the Strategic Growth Council. And Keita Price, the HUD planner, is the principal planner with the HUD Planning Group, where she aims to model a different perspective and approach to traditional city and neighborhood level planning. Randall and Keita, thanks for being with us.
Testing, testing. Can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear me? Which one better? Somebody, good morning. How y'all doing? I'm Keita Price, born and raised from Deep East Oakland, also known as a hood planner. Yay! Hey! Also known as a hood planner, also representing my own firm, the Hood Planning Group. Also, a community leader that's helped with the TCC planning and implementation process within Deep East Oakland.
I'm Randall Winston. Good morning, everyone. I'm from Los Angeles, former director of the SGC, and so good to be back here and, of course, on stage with Keita. You know, whether you're from a frontline community or drive by one on your way to work, we all know that the neighborhoods that have been redlined, overburdened, and ignored suffer from the greatest risk of extreme climate. They exist in every county and in every state.
Those redline communities, by a lot of people, by the media, from my time growing up, has been considered the ghetto, the hood. And so I like to take that hood and, flip that. To me, the hood is a place of beautiful people. To me, the greatest asset of Deep East Oakland is the people, the culture, everything that, we put on that's taken and exploited by other people, other places or whatnot. And so, yeah, this film is about a lot of the community planning work that we've been really pushing. We think that's important to not miss this opportunity, like it was said earlier, to not wait for government and other private people to, come and save us. We learned that our cities and neighborhoods are planned, designed, and developed. So now we want a part of it, and not just a seat at the table, but create our own tables, had a seat at the tables as well. And this film will show you a bit of how that transformation is being done in my hood.
This is a story about, thank you. A story about community, but it's also our story of what it took to create the Transformative Climate Communities program and the deep work that you all know too well of what it takes to build trust between policymakers and community members. This model, we believe, works at delivering results for people and for place, and it's ready to be scaled. ready to be scaled beyond the communities in which they're currently invested, and of course, beyond California. I'm thankful for so many people here for bringing this program and this film to life. And I want to thank a few of them in particular. Of course, the team at the Strategic Growth Council. Thank you all. Yes. Helene Overby and the filmmaker who is here today with his crew. Thank you all. And of course, the team at Elemental Accelerator, who have supported this film and my own efforts to expand the Transformative Climate Communities program with federal agencies and FEMA.
So yeah, in my hood, we want to create better neighborhoods, but with the same neighbors. You know, we feel like you don't need to have new people to have, man. So that's what our campaign is about. We didn't design it. We got it from another group in San Francisco, and that we asked, you know, can we use the name? It's for everybody. We feel like all hoods and places who want to have a better neighborhood with the same neighbors should be able to do so. And so I just want to give a shout out to all the past and present leaders that's, you know, help inspire me and other folks from the Black Panther Party. Some folks may just think they was about, shout out to them, about violence and guns and stuff, but they started with a lot of survival programs for the community that wasn't provided by the government or anybody else when nobody else cared. They cared about traffic and transportation. That's why I'm into planning today. And so shout out to them and the East Oakland Neighborhood Initiative and the 13 community groups that came together to push the city to even apply for a TCC planning, which led to implementation and all the beauty you'll see in the video today. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy Going Deep. Yeah, Going Deep. Screening the Going Deep. Thank you.
No, you think it's gonna be my little story? I'm not going down.
A lot of big O's.
I'm Haleen, and I am a documentary filmmaker. Last year, I was approached by Elemental and California Strategic Growth Council to go into frontline communities and investigate how they're building resiliency.
I think that the city failed the people.
Giving community residents a seat at the decision-making table.
We want to be heard. Resiliency for me is us not just being able to survive, but to thrive.
What transforms a place?
For me to live is like a real place or community.
Although I lived in East Oakland, Deep East Oakland is a
Can I have your attention? Can we quiet in the house? All right, so the audio is turned down, so we're gonna have to really be quiet. Let's restart it. Thanks, guys.
I was gonna say, that's Mike Glad. I arrived in Sacramento in 2011. I kept seeing and sensing a disconnect. And the disconnect was really, You had regulators and policymakers deciding this is what we believe is best for disadvantaged communities. But really the responsibility rests with the local government and not with the state to ensure that justice is being done.
Can we give it one more time for Keita, everyone? You know, I hope you enjoyed the film. I think I really hope that it conveyed the power of community. You know, this is difficult work. You've heard that a lot this morning. This is uncomfortable work, but it's also joyous work. And I hope the film gives you a sense of that joy and inspires you all in your own work. And on this note of joy, I think it might be the perfect segue into the next individual that I am about to introduce. And it is my honor to introduce this man of deep faith and commitment who had the pleasure of working with on TCC in Fresno, Pastor Booker T. Lewis. Now, Pastor Lewis is senior pastor of Rising Star Missionary Baptist Church in Fresno, which serves as a foundation for community-oriented and faith-based ministry. He's also president of the West Fresno Faith-Based Organization, where he has shepherded workforce training and other projects with the city of Fresno and state and local workforce investment boards. He served as a board member and member at large of Concerned Citizens of West Fresno, the NAACP, City of Fresno Plan Advisory Committees, the City of Fresno Police Reform Commission, chairman of the African American Clergy Caucus of Fresno, the Mayor's Office of Community Affairs in the City of Fresno, and, of course, the Transformative Climate Change Outreach and Oversight Committee. And so without further ado, Pastor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Winston. Well, good morning, everybody. Oh, that sounds real good. We're not going to ask for more than that. Again, I'm Pastor B.T. Lewis, Rising Star Missionary Baptist Church. I also work for the mayor's office now. That's just recently, as of the last year, as a community liaison, which ties in with everything. So the deal is this, is that I'll do work for your office in the community, but you can't change who I am. And so I've been I've been almost fired for 52 weeks. Every time you go in, you say, okay, I got something, it's bad. But anyway, they asked me to come, SGC, and thank you, Executive Director, Ms. Lynn. I can say it, Koch von Liebert. Did I say it right? Koch von Liebert. See, I can say it, but Ms. Lynn, because I come from Texas originally, Greenville, Texas, 50 miles east of Dallas. So if I get a little country on you, that's okay. Don't worry about it. It's not really Fresno. It's inbred way long ago. I moved to Fresno when I was 16. And one of the shocks of moving to Fresno is they took me. My daddy came to pastor a church. We just minding our own business, following daddy around. And when they took us, the people at the church, all African-American church, they took us to school to help us get enrolled in school. I went to Edison High School, black and gold all day long, tiger for life, tiger for life. And when I went to the school, they were like, I went to the office and asked, how many black people are here? It's like 97% black. Well, that's different from where I came from, little one-horse town, one high school, one junior high school. We had, I lived through the 60s, Doc. Nobody have to tell me about segregation. I remember segregation. I remember integration. And so I know how I had to cross the line from segregation to integration. And so I won't tell you all those details, but I'm just trying to get you a picture of my formation and my perspective on living black in America. And I was glad that our executive director asked for a moment of silence because I was sure enough gonna do it. Oh yeah, see, I think I see one of my colleagues, she was hiding from me. I sent a text, you ain't said nothing. You ain't said nothing about, I thought I was here all by myself. And so my formation really came from living in Greenville. When I came to California, I expected more out of Fresno, California than what I saw. And when I got to California, I found out that Fresno, California had a real history of redlining and segregation in the city. You know how a snowball rolls down the hill and it leaves all the snow behind it, all cluttered and damaged. It's not as smooth and pretty as it was before the snowball rolled through. Well, that's what Fresno has done for years with sprawl. They have sprawled from West Fresno through Chinatown, through downtown. Then they took a quick left to go north, and they left East Fresno behind as well. And so when I got to Fresno, all the Hispanic, Latino neighborhoods were designated for Southeast Fresno. Now, your part of town is Southwest Fresno, and everybody else has the privilege, y'all think I'm lying, moving north. Well, Fresno has moved so far north that we've run into Clovis and we've run into the Madera River, Madera County. Now we've turned another left, and now most of the building, a lot of the building is happening in Northwest Fresno. And I'm not going to live long enough to see it, but it's probably going to circle back around into Southwest Fresno, which is a particular problem because we want a better quality of life for the people that live in Southwest Fresno. This is where the TCC dollars are focused. Southwest Fresno, downtown, and right, I forgot, in the middle, Chinatown. When I came to Fresno in 1977, I'm talking about the past now. When I came to Fresno in 1977, Chinatown and downtown Fresno were still thriving places to go. There were department stores on Fulton Mall. There were places you could just catch the bus. In my little one-horse town in Greenville, Texas, I didn't have a bus. I was excited to even see a bus. And so we got on the bus, we go downtown, and we really thought we went somewhere. There were stores that we could shop at, get on the bus, go back down into Southwest Fresno. People went in and out of Chinatown, shopping and recreation, restaurants. And I got to drive. I live in Southwest Fresno. I live where most of the people at our church, where they live. I choose to live in. I used to ask my daddy, why do we always live in the poorest part of town? He said, boy, well, I have to live close to the people that I pastor. Okay, y'all, I'm trying. And so I picked up that same mentality, and that's why I live in Southwest Fresno. Here's the problem with living in Southwest Fresno. There's only one grocery store, and that ain't been there that long. It's the highest food max in town, and my wife can't stand the produce. We have to drive all over town to find the right, because we seem like we get the worst produce in town. We get the most dented cans, and we have the highest prices, but they are the highest grossing food max in the area. Are y'all still with me? Well, I'm used to people talking back to me. And so, so we don't have a valid growth. We used to have some pretty good mom and pop stores, but they have been run out of business. So West Fresno is a legitimate food desert. Okay, I can't get my suits cleaned in West Fresno. There's no cleaners anymore. I can't go to the doctor in West Fresno because all of the best doctors are in North Fresno. You better go way north of Shaw to find a good doctor in Fresno. And same thing with the dentist. Everything that you would want for yourself and for your family has left West Fresno. That's the past. Here's another thing. When I got there in 1977, West Fresno was greener. I like to drive down the street and see green grass and green fields. And I like to see a park or two every day. They taken our park. The closest park is on Belmont and 99, Roden Park. Used to be a beautiful park, but it's not the beautiful park that it used to be because we've allowed the zoo, great zoo, world-class zoo, but the zoo has taken over the park, which means that there's less green space for people like me. And so we can't ride our bicycles to Roden Park anymore for the church picnic because there's not hardly anything there to use in Roden Park. We need a first class park. We needed all of that desert. 5 minutes? Let me move quickly. Okay, that's the past. So West Fresno needed to I like that though. I ask people at church to do that for me and they won't do it at all. I'll say before I preach now, I need somebody to hold up 5. That's a 5 minutes. They won't say nothing. I applaud you for your boldness. But let me hurry and get through this. Woo, I ain't gonna be able to do it. Go to this website. You can go right now. Transformfresno.org. Go to transformfresno.org. I executive director for this project is Courtney Espinoza. Stand up, Courtney. You're gonna stand. I'm gonna mess you up right now because you good. So as a member of the Outreach and Oversight Committee, I work very closely with Courtney, putting out fires, solving problems in the community, in the projects, you know, when folks start acting funny and act like they don't, you know, want to do what the project requires, that, you know, I'm one of the persons that will get involved. You know, we got a whole committee of folk, but I'm probably the most dangerous. Fresno Now. Fresno Now, the TCC funding that has been poured into Fresno right now has already produced great benefits and great dividends. We have a state community college being built in Southwest Fresno. So just for people to see that college being built, that's inspiration all by itself. We have housing. I want to save that. We have more trees being built, projects with more trees. We have workforce projects. We have the Monarch, which is a housing development in Chinatown, where buildings are just falling apart. But we built a brand new, I have a hard time saying we, I'm not that guy, but a partnership with the Housing Authority and TCC dollars. We have a brand new housing project right there on Fresno and F Street. That's all TCC money. We have residents in West Fresno with solar who never dreamed of having solar before. That's TCC money at work. And so I got 3 minutes. And so the future, what has happened around the TCC investment is that other developers have started to develop housing projects and other things in our community. The mayor just announced a few days ago that there will soon be coming a Starbucks in Southwest Fresno. And so you say, oh, Starbucks, what? Well, that's big for Southwest Fresno, Doc. We can't even get a 7-Eleven. So we're looking forward to that. It's going to be part of that development. There's housing going to be in that same area. We're talking about, I said talking about, but we're getting there. We're talking about a bank branch west of the 99, because you can't find a bank west of the 99 in Fresno. So many of y'all just pass through Fresno and you just look upside the road, and what you see upside the road, that's not really all of Fresno. And so over the last 3 administrations, we've been able to get our administrations to admit more and more with each administration, Mayor Dyer's administration now being the boldest, allowing me to come behind the wall. That's bold, because now I get to walk around City Hall and step on toes. And so that's dangerous. That's dangerous. And so I applaud him for being so bold. We've been friends a long time. We used to hang out in the streets and fight folks. And so, Keita, you know, in the street and fight folks. And so anyway, with each administration, our challenge to bring back the communities that we have left behind into a place where they can live the best quality of life possible, not just better, but the best quality of life possible, because every citizen in Fresno deserves the opportunity to achieve and, like y'all said, thrive. Everybody. We are worried about displacement. So we've done some research on displacement, because we too want to make sure that we don't displace our residents that live in that area. West Fresno has great history, especially for the African-American community, but now it's growing for other communities as well. It's very diverse these days. And so it's very rich, especially for the African-American community, because nowhere else in Fresno can you tie the history and legacy of African-Americans in Fresno. It starts in Southwest Fresno. And so we're really excited about all of the development that's going to happen, all of the collaborations we've built. At Rising Star, we've tried to be a catalyst for collaboration and people working together, no matter where you come from, no matter who you are, no matter what color your skin is. We've tried to be an example of working together and bringing those projects forward so that our community can be the best that it can be. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. Such integration. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pastor VT Booker. What an amazing speech. Thank you. Now, for the next phase, we're going to shift gears a little bit. As we are getting ready to then start to go into our breakout rooms and start to brainstorm and start to think about how to reach transformation, we want to start thinking about what does it mean for transformation? And to understand that, we have to think bigger. We have to think longer term. We have to think bolder. And so to help us kind of to get into that mindset of what does transformation look like? What should we be shooting for? What is our moonshot as a group? We would like to have a conversation around mapping challenges and opportunities and working together on a technique that will help us really think about transformation. So I'm really excited to introduce Karthik Ramakrishnan, who is going to take us through this journey together. So Karthik is the Executive Director of the California 100 Initiative, a role that draws on his leadership experience in multiple realms, including academia, philanthropy, government, and the nonprofit sector. He is also part of our steering committee for the conference. So Karthik, please, welcome.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, everyone. I think I'm probably going to get the hook a little bit. The echo's still here. I'm going to wait. Hopefully that feedback will go down. Should I move over here? Is it better when I'm away? Is it okay here? I just need to stand here. I'm hearing feedback. You're all not hearing it? Okay, you don't. All right. Okay, if we can get the slide deck up, please. So I'm going to do a bit of presentation and a bit of interactivity. I love the low-tech yellow card thing. We're actually going to be using your Whova app today to do a little bit of warm-up exercise when it comes to strategic foresight and futures work. And as Lynn said, first of all, thank you, Lynn, and the entire team at Strategic Growth Council. It's been just a wonderful journey in collaboration with you all for this conference, but even more generally. So let's go to the next slide, please. So what I'll talk about today is work that I and colleagues have been doing to try to lay the foundation for more equitable futures. I wordsmith quite a bit. I thought through every single word here, and certainly the equitable futures part is something that I hope we all can walk away with and to really improve our game in California. Right? As California goes, so goes the nation. The governor calls us America's next coming attraction. We're really honored to be at the front of the line when it comes to strategic foresight work, as it involves a range of public agencies, philanthropy, community organizations, and young people. Next slide, please. Now, before I do that, I'll just say a little bit more about myself. I'm a professor of public policy at UC Riverside. I'm the executive director of California 100, which I'll talk about in a little bit. I also direct our Center for Social Innovation. Through all of this work, a key theme is research and frameworks for strategic action, right? We don't want all of the knowledge that is being produced in the UC system and in our higher educational system more generally to be bottled up. We want it to be in service to the important work that is happening in California. These are core to our approach at the Center for Social Innovation, and I'd say more generally in the work that I and so many others in California do. We want to make sure that data is at the core of what we do. That's what gets us our credibility, right? Systematic research. And by the way, it's not just data that is quantitative in nature, but qualitative as well. Systematic qualitative research, right? It's not anecdote. It's not narrative, and I'll say a little bit about narrative in a second. It's also important to have strategic policy awareness. When I first came to California, I worked at the Public Policy Institute of California, and I'm still so grateful for all that I learned there in terms of making sure that research is actionable and that it has impact. Paying attention to narrative. give a lot of credit and kudos to the California Endowment, where I learned so much about narrative and narrative change, and see that is now much more prevalent in the field of philanthropy, the nonprofit sector, and increasingly in government as well. Finally, innovation mindsets, and this is something that is neither left nor right. And in fact, in a place like the Inland Empire where we work, we come up with ideas that might challenge the status quo, even among those regardless of their party. And that's really important because there may be certain solutions that have worked for a while, but given the kinds of disruptions that we're seeing, we really need to start rethinking, how to maybe modify to make sure that communities that are left behind get included, but maybe even fundamentally transforming the way we even assume and analyze a particular problem. And then finally, community partnerships. That old saying that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. And we've, at the Center for Social Innovation and even at California 100, there are many times where we've had to take a beat and slow down, right? But once we get people with us and aligned again, then we're able to move pretty fast. Let's go to the next slide. So one framework that we came up with at the Center for Social Innovation, it's very, very simple. And it's a model that influences so much of what we do at the center with other projects that I've done. And I've found people who said they found this useful even in kind of corporate strategic planning. And this model is very simple. We call it DNA, which is data, narrative, action. So first of all, data. Whenever you go to decision makers with a problem, they say, I need to see the data before I'm going to do anything about it, right? To be responsible means you need to see what the systematic information is before you make a decision. So that's what we tell community partners. You have to be able to produce data, either population data, draw that down, create your own original data so that you can have credibility. So data is important for credibility. But if you want that to be meaningful and memorable, you need to have community narratives woven through. And all of that has to be in service of some kind of strategic action. This is not the advice I would give to my PhD students, right? For PhD students, it's like, just go deep on the data and the research and that's fine. Although when you're going to the job market, maybe you need to think about narrative and action too. But for the rest of us who are not pure in basic research or academia, it's so important to pay attention to narrative and action, how it weaves together. Happy to talk about that more I don't think we're gonna have time for Q&A, but during lunch and after today. Let's go to the next slide. So some of the work that I do is a project called API Data. It's a very small, it's a little bigger now in terms of staffing, but for about 7 years, it was me and a graduate student at UC Riverside. And we were getting more news coverage than entire departments of Asian American studies across the country. Because we figured out very early what you can do when you grab data, present it in a very simple and accessible way, connect it to community narrative and community power, and then see change happen. So you can see this on our website now. There's a lot under the hood in terms of what we have. Let's go to the next slide. So one prominent example of DNA in action was after President Obama announced the expansion of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program and the creation of the Deferred Action of Parents of Americans program. That day, I still remember that day, Migration Policy Institute had put out a map and a set of data on undocumented immigrants by region of origin by state in the country. Tremendous resource. I called up Sono, my graduate student at the time, and I said, Sono, I think we can generate some quick infographics here out of this, creating infographics for each state in terms of the size of the Asian undocumented population, and to show what proportion they are, not only of the overall undocumented, but of the Asian foreign-born. And that's why we came up with this blog post, an easy set of infographics, and this really powerful factoid, if you will. This is where framing and narrative works. Now, if I told you at that time, 1.3 million Asian undocumented, they're talking about millions, billions, trillions. People have no idea. It is not to human scale. We made this to human scale. And it was simple arithmetic. It was not fancy statistics. It was not original research. We took data that someone else had generated, but the numerator, Asian undocumented, denominator, Asian foreign-born, bingo, people's mindsets start shifting. Let's go to the next slide. So that day and the next day, we got so much uplift from our community partners, right? Who knew us, who trusted the information, started boosting the signal. And within 2 days, I had an interview request with Scott Simon for NPR Weekend Edition. That was powerful. I'm not saying that this is going to happen every single time, but one of the things you'll note in this report that I'll talk about in a second is this famous quote from Louis Pasteur, which is, chance favors the prepared mind, right? Luck favors those who are prepared. But being prepared in terms of your data capability, your community partnerships, your narrative skills, so that when those windows of opportunities open, you can pounce. And that's what we did. Subsequently, you had members of Congress, including the Congressional APA Caucus, using that factoid, and I knew that we were the originators of it. No one else had done that, 1 out of 7. Let's go to the next slide. So data is important. The rest of what I'm going to talk about today is not about data, and I don't want you to think that data doesn't matter. Okay? Think of that as the kind of foundation on which you build. And many of you, especially that are in public service, in government agencies doing such incredible work, this is not to say that data and research are not important. But as a researcher myself, as someone who conducts original data collection and sophisticated analyses, we need to go beyond that. Especially in the kinds of situation we face today with so much uncertainty and rapid change, past performance is not necessarily an indication of how things are going to turn out. We saw that in 2016 with the presidential election. We're seeing that today in Europe and in the world in terms of Russia and Ukraine. So we really need to start thinking and acting differently when it comes to uncertain futures. And this includes people in government agencies, in philanthropy, in community organizations. I put up there some of the kind of fundamental threats that we face, as well as some of the big opportunities. We're talking about these huge opportunities. Billions of dollars coming down to California. We don't have the right infrastructure and partnerships in place, it'll be like one of those floods just washes through. Might not have the kind of sustained, lasting impact in our communities that we hope to have. Let's go to the next slide. So that's going to be part of our journey, I think, in California. One of the things I'm excited about today is one of these breakout sessions that we have later today in terms of indicators. And be like, wow, why are you getting so excited about indicators? Like, really? That's going to be your theory of change, that indicators are going to save the world? They're not going to save the world. But what indicators do is that when we use words like resilience, when we use words like inclusion, sustainability, and equity, we need to be clear about what we mean. We need to be able to measure it. And ultimately, when we are starting to give away millions and billions of dollars, we need to be able to hold ourselves accountable and others accountable for it. And that is so important for community, because community hears these words, the latest buzzwords that come. And unfortunately, it ends up being business as usual in terms of what actually happens. Right? So it's so important for us to be able to measure. In the course of measurement, we need to be able to start from concepts to then move into indicators and then to scores of those indicators. One of the things I nerded out on in grad school and after was on concept formation and indicator formation. You want to read more? My latest book was Citizenship Reimagined, and we reimagined citizenship, whole new concept, and come up with a set of concrete indicators that people can start scoring. I'm hoping that we can do that in California. One of the ideas I've been talking to some folks in the SGC team and elsewhere, which is starting to take hold, is this notion of standards that could be akin to LEED standards when it comes to sustainability in buildings. Can we think of that kind of a California standard that sets a high bar, but maybe those different gradations, right? Of bronze, silver, gold, platinum, et cetera. There's a lot I think we can do. I think people are looking to California for this kind of innovative leadership. And I hope that with the work that we do over the next 2 days, that we will put ourselves in a really strong foundation for what's to come. Let's go to the next slide. One thing I'll say is you'll see that I love acronyms over time, and RISE is something that at the Center for Social Innovation we've been playing around with for a while. And this was largely a reaction to this notion of shovel-ready projects, and that really, for a lot of you here, it doesn't feel right? That just means you go with whatever is convenient and fast, regardless of what the long-term impact might be. So some people started saying shovel-worthy over time. As I talked to various colleagues, they're like, we're not going to talk about shovels anymore. Right? We need to come up with something else. I'm not saying that what we have is the Ready to Rise framework, kind of an aspirational framework that acknowledges that readiness matters, and to really start getting deeper and more concrete in terms of what community readiness means. But one thing I'll say, if you go beyond the working paper, you can find this on our website at the Center for Social Innovation, is to also think about readiness not only from the community side, but what does government readiness mean? What does philanthropy's readiness mean? It has to be a two-way street in many of these instances, right? The people talk in the higher education setting, like people have been thinking about how do you make students college ready? Well, how do you make colleges student ready? So that's the kind of creative work we can do as we continue building here. Again, making sure that it has impact, and especially long-term impact. Encourage you to check it out. Really looking forward to the breakout session today in terms of how people come up with both ideas and concepts, but also indicators to know, how do you know when you see inclusion? How do you measure it? How do you track it? How do you improve on it? How do you hold people accountable for their commitments to inclusion? Next slide, please. So I'm going to pause there before I move to the rest, which is going to be about strategic future. So as someone who is in academia, who from the beginning has been told to always stick to the data, don't speculate beyond that. You know, over time, I've come along in my journey, and I think many academics have too, especially in terms of the importance of public engagement. As the governor said, people are looking for solutions. They're not just looking at analysis of problems. So it's important to be able to make that shift, right? To start moving into speculation. But sometimes speculation, it's well-informed hypotheses, right? But it's even beyond that now. And this is where I think a lot of people who have maybe a more kind of narrow scientific upbringing might start getting a little uncomfortable. So in terms of doing strategic, and by the way, I was very uncomfortable when I started this work on strategic foresight. I was like, you know, I have part of my background is in demography. So I understand 5-year, 10-year projections, sometimes demographic projections, 20, 30 years, but that's model fitting. You can also think about drivers of change, right? Fertility, net international migration, mortality. So there are ways that you can project into the future. But when you talk about strategic foresight, it is not about projection. It is not about forecasting, right? And I don't want to get too weird here. I will get a little weird as we go through this exercise. But it's about things like intuition. It is things like sensing. It is using judgment from all the work that you've done to start sensing signals of what's coming. To be able to differentiate which something that is just like a one-off and something that is a pattern that you need to start paying attention to and getting prepared for. It's also about getting comfortable with complexity. So often we love to have simple models, theories of change. But how do we start getting comfortable with complexity? One of the things you'll see with California 100, we have 15 issue areas. People might think that's 14 too many. But we're comfortable with that. We're starting to look at the intersection across various issues. Challenge your assumptions, right? I mean, especially what we're seeing today in terms of geopolitics, in terms of what's happening with our climate, in terms of what's happening with our society. The old assumptions are not working out so well because we're moving between what seemed like a fairly stable order towards hopefully some other stable order, but we're in this period of transition. So all the assumptions that got built into that earlier system won't necessarily serve us well in terms of what's to come. And then finally, let's get creative and have fun. And you'll see that in terms of some of the exercises we'll do today, but also with this toolkit that we're so proud to be launching today at the SGC Catalyst Conference. Let's go to the next slide. So I'll talk a little bit about California 100 before I talk about our Futures Toolkit that we just launched today and that we encourage you to check out. Next slide. So California 100, so the 100, it stands for 100 years. That was part of the intimidation factor for a lot of us when we stepped into this. But 100 can also mean 100%, right? What does system perfection look like, right? What is that unalloyed ideal that we're trying to achieve? Now, California 100 is an initiative that has several parts to it. At base, it is a sponsored project of the University of California and Stanford University. Part of my joke is that we brought Cal and Stanford together. We got USC and UCLA together. We're already making progress, right? The future looks bright for California. But it's not just about the research centers from these universities and others, but it's about the strategy and pulling the civic energy of the state together to do this kind of work. Let's go to the next slide. So it's a lot of text here. You can check out our website when you go to the About page in terms of our vision, mission, and goals. Let's go to the next slide. Now, in all of the work we do, this is something that I've learned maybe the hard way over the last 5 to 7 years. When you try to do collective projects together, people think, let's just bring people who have the right intention and who are leaders in different spheres who want to do good things together. Let's just put them in a room and let's achieve great things together. What I found is that if you don't get explicit about values and core principles from the beginning, you are going to be spinning your wheels for a while. One of the ways is that, with collective action problems, if people feel like their individual organizational interest is not aligned with what you're doing in the collective, they're going to start dropping out. But there's no way to hold yourselves accountable, right, in terms of the core values that you care about. So many of us are in organizations where we list our core values, but I don't think many of us have actually started getting concrete in terms of how those get operationalized. And that's one of the things that I hope that we achieve. Certainly we're trying with California 100. It's not that we achieve this in everything we do, but it's always a reminder, right? It's that plaque on the wall, if you will, to figure out, are we being as inclusive as we could be in what we're doing here? Are we being as equitable as we could be in what we're doing here? We have a long way to go in what we're doing in California 100 to live up to those ideals. But it's good. It's always good to have that. I would also say that when we're in this period of transition and disorientation, it's one of those solid things that you can hold on to. Solutions may vary, even your analysis of the problem may vary, but it's so important to hold on to those core values to anchor you in this moment where there is, a lot of volatility, to say the least. Next slide. We have a bunch of work streams. Let's go to the next slide. And we have some amazing directors, including former dean at the Goldman School of Public Policy, who is our director of research, the former communications director for Governor Newsom, who's our director of engagement, Amy Lerman, who heads up the Possibility Lab at Berkeley, who's our director of innovation, and Allison Burke, who's our director of advanced technology. Next slide. We also have an amazing commission. So we have an intergenerational commission. About half the people are over 35, half under 35. By the way, one of the ideas we're playing around with is that every single board and commission in California has to have someone under the age of 35 in that video. Right? And I remember talking to someone, I said, surely you don't mean surgical and medical boards too, because some of those people, they only start being a surgeon at age 30. And I was like, yeah, I think we mean that too. Why not have someone who's a resident on one of these commissions? But we're just so lucky to have that kind of intergenerational mentoring that flows both ways in the work that we do. Next slide. We're also doing a lot of research. So I'm going to zip through this because I know we have to get to our exercises. So in terms of research, we've done a lot of research that takes the future seriously, and especially in terms of 2x2 scenarios. Next slide. Remember what I said about trying to do everything? The joke I say is that, people might accuse us of boiling the ocean, and we care about sustainability, so we will not boil the ocean. But we are tackling everything simultaneously, right? How many people have heard of the Future of Work Commission and the work that they did? Important work. But we knew even then that work is connected to education, it's connected to housing, it's connected to transportation, and so much more. So you'll see most substantive issue areas here. You will also see things like governance, media, and civil society. It's a pretty broad topic. You'll also see things like federalism and foreign relations. One of the crazy ideas, maybe not so crazy, that we're exploring is what might it mean for California to open up consulates with our top 10 trading partners around the world? What might it look like for California to enter into compacts with other states beyond the kind of interstate compacts that exist, and especially thinking about climate and so many other factors, health insurance, right? Not just state exchanges, but interstate compacts. Especially as the future of the United States as a union and this particular relationship between the federal government and state government becomes uncertain, these are the kinds of questions we should be asking. And remember, chance favors the prepared mind. We need to get prepared for what's to come. Let's go to the next slide. So we have 5 thematic areas that are buckets for all of this. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read through them, but we think we've covered most of the landscape of what needs to be done. Next slide. We're also doing a lot on policy innovation. Let's go to the next slide. So this is Amy Lerman and her team's work. We have 8 innovation projects. Check out our site to see what those projects are. A lot of them involve state agencies and local agencies, and sometimes just purely with nonprofit organizations. Next slide. Now, Amy's team is also doing something else that is so important today, which is when we talk about data, we just assume that the kind of data that we're collecting capture the concept or the value that we care about. What Amy's team is doing is what they call everyday indicators for policy innovation, which is a community-grounded and stakeholder-grounded data collection, right? It's ground truthing it with those actors to figure out if the data that we collect is actually capturing what we are trying to improve or maximize. Let's go to the next one. Just to put it very concrete, especially in light of Tyree Nichols' beating and murder, and with the gun violence, right, in Monterey Park and Half Moon Bay, we have a certain notion of what safety means, and we measure it in terms of crime statistics. But what if you ask community members what true safety actually means? That is a project that we're doing. The California 100, Amy's team is doing in Oakland and in New York, to start having a grounded sense of what that means, getting input and buy-in from law enforcement, elected officials, to come up with a new understanding and a new set of indicators, putting it into place, and then making that the basis in which you evaluate, that the basis in which you start allocating resources. Similarly, they're doing that for mental health and well-being, as well as this notion of stable housing. So exciting work, and happy to connect you with Amy and her team if you want to know what's happening there. Next slide. Now, looking ahead, now this is a slide I had before. I was like, should I change it for today? It's like, nah, I think I'm going to keep it for today. So we are so proud to be launching our toolkit on strategic foresight for decision makers today. And I'll say more about that in a second. But truly looking ahead, on March 12th, let's go to the next slide. We're going to have the first ever Youth Futures Summit in the United States. It's going to be here in Sacramento. It's going to be on the west lawn of the Capitol. Everybody's welcome. They're like, I'm over 35. Am I welcome? Yes, you're welcome. Everybody is welcome. We have campus fellows throughout the state that have been working on these vision and roadmaps for the future that they're calling manifestos for the future of California. So we're going to have some inspiring art, large format art right in front of the state capitol. With that, we're going to have interactive booths and exercises. We're going to have Afrofuturism lead people in a really amazing exercise to get people more warmed up and prepared for the future. So please join us. If you're interested, just go to california100.org/youth, and there's a sign up page there, and we will send you more information. People in government agencies, we would love to work with you. We have young leaders coming from throughout the state. So if you have programs where you're trying to reach out to young leaders in California, that will be the place to be. Hopefully the weather is good. It's going to be a lot of fun. We have at least 3, maybe 4 food trucks that we've already booked. So you are all welcome. It's also going to be the weekend when the UC Students Association is going to be here, and it's the day before their lobbying day. So we thought, what a perfect opportunity to basically project this notion that the future of California cannot proceed without young people leading the charge. That they have ideas, they need to be listened to. Some of their ideas might sound far out, but often it's those crazy ideas that then later on through testing, pressure testing, become adopted. That's the work of social movement activity. That's the work of the environmental movement. That's the work of the queer rights movement, civil rights movement. That's the kind of energy we're hoping to capture on March 12th. We hope you can join us. Let's go to the next slide. In terms of what the young people are working on is also what our commission is going to be working on, which is a vision and roadmap for the future of California. And we've kind of systematized this into 4 components. 1 is visioning, 2 is coming up with solutions, 3 is coming up with strategies, and 4, you can come up with strategies all day, every day, but if you don't have your personal commitment, your professional commitment, your agency's commitment, the kind of commitments you're going to demand or ask of others, these are just nice strategies that don't mean anything, right, in terms of impact. So what we're going to do today for the rest of this time is to drill down into vision, but I still have a little bit more to talk about this toolkit. But one way I love, in addition to acronyms, I love metaphors and analogies. So think of visioning. Most places in California, there's some kind of mountain range in the horizon. You may or may not be able to see it given air quality, but it's there. Visioning is being able to see that summit and to get others to see that summit as well. Solutions is when you start thinking about all the different ways you can get to that summit from where you are, right? All of the different pathways. Those all could represent solutions. Now, strategies are both opportunities, but also threats for you to get there. Your campsite might get flooded out. You might have a forest fire. Bears might steal your food. You might get lost. The key is, how do you overcome those barriers? Often when we talk about doing futures work, people say, I'm suffering and struggling right now. I don't have the luxury to think about 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. But that's how inequities happen. People don't have the resources, are the ones that are always stuck reacting to what is being thrown at them, whereas other more powerful actors are able to do that long-term futures work. So we're hoping to build this capability more generally in California. And then finally, the commitment is to make sure that everyone gets to that summit at the same time, regardless of ability. And that's where maybe the innovation comes in. Maybe not everyone goes on foot. Maybe some people fly. Let's go to the next slide. So what we're launching today, this is a really, really long windup for the big reveal, which is the toolkit that we hope you all will download. You don't need to read through it now, but take a look at it maybe this evening, certainly over the weekend. It is chock full of ideas and resources for you to use. We're really proud to partner with School of International Futures for the toolkit that we're releasing today. Let's go to the next slide. So the goal of this toolkit is to, at a basic level, take what has been happening in the field of strategic foresight, including with entities like Institute for the Future, who've been doing this for decades, to mainstream it, to professionalize it, to increase its adoption, and to democratize it. Now, some of the early strategic foresight work in the 1960s was by the Shell Oil Corporation. They actually used it to weather the energy crisis and shocks of the 1970s. Global firms and a few international organizations do this right now. But there's such an asymmetry between what happens with these really powerful actors and what's happening with less powerful actors in society. And that's where we need to start leveling up that playing field, because there is an asymmetry in terms of strategy going on right now. We want to make this accessible. So some futurists may balk or blanch at this notion that we're like, it's kind of like strategic planning, but it's the next step. Some people won't like it in the futures field. That's okay, because the problems we're facing are too big right now to mince words, right? In terms of strategic foresight versus strategic planning. And finally, we want to provide tools that are very pragmatic for you to use. We'll have a working session tomorrow. We invite you to come. Would love to get your critical feedback. If you're like, you know what, this is not as clear as you think it is, can you clarify? We have a both and approach to what we're doing. We want this to enable you to be both visionary and pragmatic. Think about that long-term roadmap, right? That summit, as well as all the challenges you're going to face and the steps you need to take along the way. And as it says in that toolkit, engage not only the head, but the hearts and the hands. Encourage you to check that out and see inspiring examples of what's happening throughout the world in this work. Next slide. So part of the motivation here is that is this just another word for strategic planning? The answer is no. Because what it does is it takes uncertainty and time and complexity very, very seriously. And what it does is it encourages decision makers to get comfortable with their assumptions being challenged and to embrace that uncertainty. Next slide. And these kind of disruptions are all around us, right? I just pulled up 3 examples, including one from this morning from Marketplace. Chip shortage no longer, there's a glut now, right? I mean, tell that to all those car companies that were so smart in terms of how they might be prepared, and they were caught flat-footed. My audio system in my car still does not work, by the way. I'm super frustrated by that, and I had to wait like months to get it fixed, but it's still not fixed. We also saw that with the flooding, right? When I heard one of our commissioners talking about the Monterey Peninsula becoming an island, I was like, what? And apparently it happened once before, a couple of decades ago. We might be seeing more of that. That's going to have huge implications, no matter what government agency or what organization you're a part of. Then, of course, when it comes to climate change, things happening around the world will impact our ability to make progress there. So California might need to start thinking about foreign policy in a more serious way, at the very least, to be able to influence what the federal government does, right? In terms of how we move about the world. Next slide. I'll just pull up a few pages, but they're slides, really. They're in this kind of 2x1 format. You can just grab it and go, right? We have a Creative Commons license on this thing. Just take it, use it, tell us how you used it, and how we can improve what we do. So SWAF has this really interesting triangle where they talk about the importance of doing this futures work, not only with political leaders, but also with leaders across different sectors. And then ultimately, we have to bring the people along. And ideally, you would do this simultaneously. We're trying to do this with California 100. It's hard to do kind of a mass engagement on this. We're trying to do it with our youth work. We also have a deliberative democracy exercise that we'll be running soon that tries to get at that. But all 3 legs of that triangle, or three points of that triangle, are important to do. Let's go to the next slide. By the way, they have that saying there, anticipatory governance. I just love that. They start leaning into that, right? It's governance and it's anticipatory. You're going to find a lot of brain candy in this toolkit. First time I saw this, it wasn't as well produced in terms of its art, and I was like, what is going on here? But to think about pace layers and different rates of change. Fashion, right, changes every season, let alone every year. Commerce, But then you go down to the bottom in terms of at least certain aspects of nature, right? Certain dynamics are much slower to change, but they're kind of inexorable. Like once you get that wheel turning, it's gonna be really, really hard to make it stop. I found this just so helpful. There are things that we already know, but to see it laid out in this way and how it might affect our decision-making is pretty huge. Next slide. This is something that when I spoke to some of the folks in the Strategic Growth Council, they were super excited. This is a 3 horizons exercise. Essentially, we are in a current system that we know is going to be on its way out. That's in the red line. The green system is what our new system could look like, and blue represents a transition system. So look at that exercise to figure out where you are on those 3 curves and what you can do to hasten, ideally a brighter, a better system, for people and the planet that's to come. Let's go to the next slide. We have inspirations from other cities and countries. Let's go to the next slide, including indicators from Singapore, right? Remember that LEED certification, California standard? Well, other countries are starting to do some of this already. Let's go to the next slide. Visioning is one important piece that we will workshop now, and we'll do this very quickly using your Whova app. So it's important to be able to see that summit, right? And the first time when I saw the stock image, I was like, damn, turn to clear vision. That's what it says on these, at least some of these telescopes that you see in tourist spots. It was at least intriguing, if not deep, when I had to reflect on that. Let's go to the next slide. So we're going to do a futures news headline. So get your phones ready. We're going to get you on Whova to create some news headlines, right? So this is a comedic take on it in terms of dystopian headlines from the perspective of humans, but maybe utopian ones from the perspective of robots and insects who have finally taken over the world. Let's go to the next slide. So one thing, let's go to the next slide. So by the way, this could be a news headline in California in 2030, where we've not only lost 1 congressional seat, but maybe 3 congressional seats because we didn't build enough housing, right? Or had enough affordable places to live beyond housing. So there are certain news headlines we want to avoid. But let's go to the next slide. We want you to start generating some news headlines about your aspirational future for California, about an issue that you care about. So I don't know how the tech works on this. So if they go to Whova, is there a poll that's live? Okay. Great. Okay. So people are already starting to type. Think of a news headline. It has to be short. Care about transportation. What does that mean for California to have made it, quote unquote, by 2033 when it comes to transportation? What does it mean when it comes to have, quote unquote, made it on healthcare or economic mobility, whatever your issue is? Cars banned. Wow. All borders abolished. California records no gun deaths in 2020. Wow, that's very quick. That's like next year. California takes a lead in reducing income and wealth inequality for its most vulnerable residents. Homes for all. Abolish the police and borders. California is carbon neutral. California is universal income. Western, okay, it's just going. Good. Hopefully y'all can see what's happening. We're recording this, but keep them coming, right? I did a training with a bunch of legislators last month, and I said, and many of them are, they're in their freshman year, they're in their first year. They're going to be around for the next 12 years. And I said, just remember this for yourself about the kind of legacy you want to leave by the time that you're done in the legislature. And that's something I would say to you. Maybe you won't be in your organization or your role for the next 10 to 12 years, but think about that, right? Think about that kind of news headline. It's a very simple way for people to start doing futures work. We all read news headlines all the time. Let's start coming up with those aspirational news headlines. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So next, one thing that you can start doing when you read the toolkit is then, remember vision is that summit. You can start thinking about narratives, thinking about what does the rest of that story say? And then you can start backcasting. Let's go to the next slide. Backcasting is going from that summit and then thinking about alternative pathways to get there. So that simple news headline exercise, when you read the toolkit, check it out, you can use that as the basis to start doing other exercises in that toolkit. Next slide. Finally, let's start getting concrete about core values. So some of what you're going to do today is going to matter for the breakout session. So let's go to the next slide. So this is going to be very quick. This is going to be word cloud exercises, right? And I don't know if we have enough time to show it on screen, but innovation, 1 or 2 words that you would use to describe innovation. What does innovation mean to you? Courage. By the way, I love every single time there's all these things that I just never would have thought. Moving forward, creativity, evolving forward. Now notice that the word technology isn't showing up as a dominant word, and yet a lot of people think when they think innovation, when you think about a chief innovation officer in your county government or city government, most often it's your data officer, right? Or your IT officer. So just reflect on that as we kind of do this word cloud. So we'll give another 10 seconds on this. And then team, can we go to the next poll, which is about resilience? So this is quick draw. Shouldn't take you more than 10 seconds to do the next one. What word or 2 words come to mind when you think about resilience? Community, thrive, adaptability, strength, stronger, community-led, sustainable, got this, empowerment, lasting, people, long haul. Okay, let's go next to inclusion. What word or 2 words come to mind when you think about inclusion? Thank you, team, for moving so quickly on the tech here. Access, belonging, welcoming, power, love, community, diversity, everyone together. And you'll notice some words like equity come in, right? Even though we might think of equity and inclusion as related but distinct, there are a fair number of people who will say equity when the word inclusion comes up, and probably vice versa as well. And that's important to recognize. As much as we want to have clean concepts and indicators, the way it is perceived by others also matters, right? When you think about narrative. Okay, let's go to the next one, which is sustainability. This should be like piece of cake for everyone here. What word or 2 words would you use to describe sustainability? Enduring, harmony, money, long-term, future, enough, zero growth, fascinating. So we'll give another 10 seconds for people to jot their word or 2 words about sustainability. 7 generations, balance, mindful. See the word resilient in there. All right, and then the last one, which I think it's safe to say is a core California value, which is equity. What are the words that people associate with equity? So as you're doing this, this is mentioned in the toolkit a little bit. So part of my nerding out on concepts and indicators, what we're doing right now is looking at the extension of a concept, all of the possible labels and attributes that you might stick to that. Actually, no, all the and now I'm going to get this wrong. So extension is all the different cases where you know that it's happening. Actually, this has a mix of both. And then intention is all of the values and attributes you would associate with the concept. And so you can use both types of techniques. Most of the time, people are using adjectives, so those look like attributes. But you could do this word cloud exercise in which you say, give me all the examples when you've seen something that was a project that was really equitable, right? Or sustainable. So there's two different ways that you can make real the kinds of concepts that we care about. Let's go to the next slide. So we're not going to have time for this last one. So it's just something for you to keep in mind, or if you have time before you exit today, is to think about how can you make California more inclusive, innovative, resilient, inclusive, sustainable, and equitable on these issues that you care about. Next slide. Come up with your vision statement. You do have that as another final poll feature in your Whova app. This is what we're asking all of our young people to do. To finish the sentence, right? We envision a California where this is true, or we dream of a California where this is true, or we will fight for a California where this is true, and where the this is true involves people, places, or communities that are part of that aspirational vision for the future. I think I have one more slide and I'm done. Right? Just think a couple final thing I'll say, final words to potentially inspire you. I mean, when you think about visioning and dreaming, like MLK's I Have a Dream Suite, I mean, he was like, he did it, he nailed it decades ago. Having that vision, right, in terms of what that promised land looks like. But you can also think about intriguing questions like, what does system perfection mean? Or we know about net zero emissions, what does net zero racism mean for California? What is that vision? Encourage you to do that. Thank you all for your time, and I look forward to talking more in the breakout session.
Thank you so much, Karthik, for helping us get into a mind state of thinking about innovation today, tomorrow, and the next 100 years in a way that is value-driven and intersectional. Thank you, Karthik. Have been asked to give a couple of housekeeping items up top, but before that, maybe why don't we just all stand up and stretch a bit? Maybe fist bump your neighbor, say hello, do a shimmy. All right, while you're doing that, I also just wanted to thank everybody. I see standing, not stretching. Come on. Thank you. All right. So to keep everybody on time and to maximize our lunch time, we're going to keep moving forward. So if you all don't mind having a seat, we'll get moving with the next panel. All right. Thanks, everybody. Please have a seat. They can hear me. Okay. Jesse. All right, we're going to get started with the next panel. And so if you could have a seat, that would be great. Thanks so much. We've lost. That's okay. I can't do that. All right, if you're still with us, can I get a cheer? A woo! Awesome, thank you. All right, we're gonna get started with the next panel to keep us on time and maximizing our lunchtime together. So just real quick, I also wanted to thank everybody for dealing with our test run of the AV system. I personally feel lucky to have been introduced and welcomed by the governor twice and to have heard Keita and Randall's presentation 3 times. If that's not enough for folks, pour yourself an extra drink on Emily and I tonight. So thanks for folks who are sticking with us for this next panel. My name is Kiran Kumar. I'm SGC's Deputy Director of Equity and Government Transformation. It might only be in this room where the title Equity and Government Transformation gets a round of applause, but I'll take it. That means that I get to oversee an inside-outside strategy around investing deeply in not building, but harnessing community capacity, while also transforming government to work more effectively for communities. So I'm really excited for this next panel titled The Key to Justice 40, maybe more or less what we're all here to learn a little bit more about. Also for time, Jesse, I'm gonna let you do your own intro because you can do it better than me. But to lead us in this panel conversation is Jessica Buendia, who's the National Director for dream.org and the, oh no, she's gonna do it better than I can. Jesse.
Thank you. All right, we have had a very long morning already, so I actually want to encourage you guys to stand and listen, stretch and listen, lean against a wall and listen. Whatever you need to physically do, it will not be disruptive to us or our panelists. It is what's going to actually let you listen better and be more in tune and more connected. So whatever you have that you need to do it, because we know that we're between you and lunch. Oh my gosh. So yes, my name is Jessie Buendia. I'm the Vice President of Sustainability at dream.org and Green for All's National Director. And so thank you. Dream.org, we close prison doors and open doors of opportunity. We dream of a world without prisons, pollution, poverty, and polarization. And the program that I work on, Green for All, at the national level is really focused on making sure that as the green economy grows, communities of color are benefiting with jobs, opportunities, better health, and a better quality of life. And so I'm really excited to be here today. We have a few different reasons we're here today. We're very passionate about finding networks of folks who want to do climate equity policy at the federal and state level. We're passionate about lifting up, again, best practices that are coming in from the field to make sure that the Biden-Harris executive order around Justice 40 is implemented to lift up the community visions that you guys have all been working on. And we also want to unleash the power of Black and Brown entrepreneurs in the sector, because there are some badass people out there that are ready to implement these climate equity projects and get them to scale. And so that's why we're here. We're also here because we're very excited to launch and again, the branding you will hear a number of times across today's conference, our Transformative Communities program, built again on the legacy and the success of the work that California has been doing, where we as a national organization will be connecting to and working in partnership with both geographically and politically diverse communities across the country to actually make sure that community vision and community-driven economic development practices are lifted up and supported by federal investment dollars. So again, we're hoping that we can really create work and wealth opportunities for communities of color across this country. So I do want to just take the moment, because I get to, as the moderator, to introduce some of my staff that's here. So we have our federal policy team, Ryan and Bella, who are here. So I just need you to stand up and like shake and wave. Yes, again, yeah, there you are. Where's Bella? Bella, all right. Our state policy team, and so we have Emily and Ivana here. Again, big waves so people can see you, all right? And then our new Transformative Communities team members, Jerry, who some of you might know, Jerry Yang Johnson and Kendall, there they are. So we're hosting, as the national replication sponsor, a workshop tomorrow afternoon. I hope you'll all join us there to keep the conversation going. But for today, I'm inviting this very illustrious group of panelists to join me. And like I said, you guys, we are what's keeping us between the programming and lunch. And so I want some energy. Yeah. Like when I call these people, I want them to feel like they're Academy Award recipients. Like give them some high fives if you're on the side as they actually come up here, like get that energy going, make them feel like all-stars. Okay. Shasta, Gan, Environmental Director, Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. Thank you, Palo Band of Mission Indians. All right. Okay, Emmy Wang, Deputy Director of Capacity Building, the Green Lining Institute. All right. Sheila Lewis, Director of the Office of Community Support, US EPA. All right, and Felipe Escobar, Organizing Director, Pacoima Beautiful. Bienvenidos, come here on stage. We're waiting for you. Okay. Side note, the reason I'm giving my 150% is because I had the luxury of working at the Strategic Growth Council for 4 years. So just want to shout out to the SGC staff members that really made this incredible work happen, and blood, sweat, and tears, mornings, nights, Saharna, Sophie, all you folks out there, thank you for making TCC a reality. All right. First question, I'm actually going to ask each of you to introduce yourself and pass the mic down. In the spirit, again, of us being the panel before lunch, keep it short, but also just want you to know, we are excited about why you came to this panel today and what readiness means to you.
So I have one of these. I'm not sure.
No, you're set.
Yeah, okay, we're good. Well, I'm a loudmouth anyway, so I don't know if I'd need the microphone, but my name is Shasta Gaughan. I am the Environmental Director and Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Palo Band of Mission Indians. That's in Payomkawitchum territory, Luiseño, and also Kupangawitchum people of Pala. And I'm proud to be here on their behalf. I am not Indigenous. I've worked for Pala for 18 years. I believe there's a couple of Pala tribal members here. Yeah, there you are, Connor. I thought I saw you over there in the distance.
Big wave.
So he's basically my boss because he's a member of the community that I serve. And that's why I'm here to talk about some of the Strategic Growth Council's work and how the state of California can do better in the work that it does with California's Native American nations.
Cool. All right. Can y'all hear me? All right. Hi, y'all. My name is Emmy Wang. I'm the Associate Director of Capacity Building at the Green Lining Institute. And yeah, super excited to be part of this conversation because our work is capacity building. I lead a team that's called the Capacity Building Team, which really focuses on, working with local stakeholders to provide and kind of connect and be the bridge between resources, policies, programs, funding, so that communities can achieve their own visions for self-determination. And that work, I think, is so necessary because I think we see kind of if we're going to keep it broad, two broad themes in the field, right? One, communities need funding and resources to engage in the deep organizing, engagement, planning, and partnerships work that has to be at the root of any project or program. And then two, beyond that step, right, beyond just resources and time, communities also need technical expertise to turn those into, right, we're having this conversation around readiness, to turn those into ready, actionable project ideas. And so, this notion of project readiness, community readiness, government readiness is definitely central to our work. So excited to dig in.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sheila Lewis. I'm with the Environmental Justice Office at EPA. And I'm so excited to be here with everyone. We have been working in the area of environmental justice since 1994. And we know in all the years that we've been working with the community, we hear from them. Our grants program started in the late 90s, early 20s, and also through the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council. So we have learned that it's key to hear from the communities, and the communities lead the work that we do. Yes, I am a federal employee, but I'm a boomer. So I feel as a federal employee, I'm really a civil servant, and we are here to serve the community. And in actuality, the environmental justice program in EPA is actually an advocate of the community. We're talking about constantly talking to our agency colleagues and our federal family about how they can better serve the communities. And early on, when we had fewer resources, we had to focus on the planning and assessment, the community really understanding what the issues are, because that is the fundamentals of how they create successful projects. And that's where our grant program started. And through the years, we've been able to hear through our grantees and the NEJAC about how we can develop better grant programs to help them get ready for larger resources and build capacity. Thank you.
Everybody, Felipe Escobar, Pacoma Beautiful. Pacoma Beautiful is the only environmental justice organization in the San Fernando Valley. That the work that we do is to educate, advocate. We also use arts in order to promote health in San Fernando Valley. And I'm really blessed to do this work because I'm on the ground. I feel like I have like many mothers, right? Because I work with community members. So I have like Doña Maria comes to a meeting, she'll bring some salsa. Sofia, she'll bring some chilaquiles, some Julio, so some plants. So it feels like a family, right? Being on the ground. So for me, it's important to have those voices at the table, right? As we work for these plans, making sure that Doña Maria, Sofia, and Julio, right? Even though they go to school, they didn't study this, their lived experience, right? Making sure the lived experience are reflected in the investments that we're making.
All right, Sheila, we're starting with you. Can you talk about what EPA has heard broadly from communities in terms of the importance of readiness and pre-implementation support?
Okay, thank you for that question. So as I mentioned a little bit in the intro, it's important for communities to be prepared. And that's going to vary a lot depending on each organization. For some, they need the capacity just to prepare the organization to receive the funds. It amazes me the amount of work that you all do as community organizations and leaders with volunteers. And in order to be able to take that to the next level, in order to be prepared to create successful projects, they need resources. You know, a lot of us are getting paid to be here today, but then we need organizations to also have the resources to pay their staff. So it's very fundamental. It's about understanding the issues in the community. So there's really a great need for assessment, for capacity of the organization, and then for the planning. Certainly the community knows the issues. However, they need technical experts to help them to create the plans, to help them to understand what needs to be done. And so that is a fundamental framework of what's needed at the very beginning. And then as you grow, you need partners. You know, a lot of the issues the communities can't address on their own. They need their city, they need their county, they need their state. And so there needs to be resources to bring them to the table as well. So that's kind of what we've been hearing through. And this is mainly through our grant recipients because we have a strong relationship with them. And our grants, we give them the funds, but we are also tell them we are partners. And so, and we know that the projects that we fund are just a small piece of what's going on in the community. And we want them to know that we're there for the long haul. And then we also want to help facilitate getting others to the table because that's what they also have let us know is a big need. That's a snapshot.
Sheila, that's absolutely great. And I think I can speak for everyone to say it's just exciting to have government also have members of our community representing so deeply committed to doing that community work. Now, guys, what did I say? We need some feedback channels. So if you hear something that you like, that resonates, you know, if somebody's calling you out for the work that you've done, you snap, you clap, you do whatever you need to do, okay? All right, we are really excited. Felipe, thank you. We would love to hear some grounding examples in terms of the importance of building readiness from your experience on the ground.
Definitely. So Pacoima got a TDC grant back in 2019. But the work to get started for that actually started back in 2011 with the deputy director. She started this program called the People's Planning School. And that's because we knew, right, our community we're working in Pacoima is mostly Latino immigrants. So when we talk about some of the things like zoning, right, in Mexico, right, there's no zoning. If you want to like a store, you do a store, right? But in Pacoima, it's different, right? There's something called zoning. So in order for us to start planning, coming together, looking for a vision, it's about just doing the education together, right? Like what does it mean? What does zoning mean? What does greenhouse mean? Looking at the justice issues, right? Looking at why Pacoima is the way it is. Because for many of us, right, I also grew up near the area. So when I was growing up, it was normal, like just going to the park and just not seeing like just the restrooms being clean or just not seeing street sweeping. For me, that was normal, right? So for us, it's just talking about, this is not normal for us, how can we make it better? And what do we need to do? And of course, the resources also help out, right? Because there's a lot of barriers for people to get engaged, right? Some of the mothers that I work with, they work, sometimes they can't stay there because they have to cook dinners, right? So how do we have the resources to eliminate those barriers, right? So people have, dinner, childcare, translation, so to get part of the table and be fully present, because our communities a lot of times are in crisis. So just doing a lot of stuff, right? So we want to make sure they're present and at the table. We need to make sure we have the resources for them to do that.
I see you. And the Keynote has been doing work across the state for a long time and is an incredibly respected leader here. I'm wondering, from your statewide perspective, can you provide a story or case study that defines readiness for California?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, we've heard a lot about this program called Transformative Climate Communities today. I want to hop on the bandwagon, but to really illustrate the work we've been able to do with partners in Stockton and really talk about the ecosystem that's been building in Stockton. So just as brief background, right? Stockton is one of the communities that has received one of those big catalytic Transformative Climate Communities grant. That has been an anchor for the community to center climate and environmental justice. $35 million is nothing to scoff at. It's a big deal. But really what I want to talk about here is the power and the durability of leadership, of partnerships, and civic infrastructure that has been created through that work. So there are folks here who I want to shout out. At Greenlining, we talk a lot about the ecosystem of change, which is about the community of actors that have to come together to do this multi-stakeholder partnership work, to really drive a community's vision powerfully forward. And for us, it's three folks, right? It's a community anchor who kind of anchors whatever project directly in resident identified needs. It's technical assistance. It's a third party, someone who's helping to fill gaps that we know are so present in under-resourced communities. And then it's also a supportive local government as you can get. You've got to be in the mix, right? So in Stockton, in terms of our community anchor, there's an organization called Little Manila Rising, represented by Irene Colimlin over there. And Little Manila, we've been working with Little Manila, since 2016, like for about 7 years now. They started, the roots of this organization, community-based organization, is in ethnic studies and cultural preservation. And then because of the deep needs in the community, they've become this anchor CBO for kind of jack of all trades, all things, but including a deep focus on environmental justice and air quality. So Little Manila has kind of just grown in power and strength and size through this period of 7 years. On the TA side, the technical assistance side, there's an organization called Edge Collaborative, represented by Ann Rogan, who I don't know if she's, hi Ann, who spun out of the city and is a civic incubator for the field. So really investing in deep kind of movement building and technical assistance around climate justice and then also economic development, and has really just helped to fill and buttress a lot of gaps. And then lastly, right, that local government leg, Anne and I were laughing about this yesterday. So in terms of local government, we were super, lucky to have the support of Mayor Michael Tubbs. But on the administrative side, someone needs to administer this big grant. And so the city of Stockton, to manage a $35 million grant application, had a 22-year-old AmeriCorps be the lead staff. Because cities too have deep capacity gaps. Cities too are under-resourced. And Stockton received that big award, and now that administrator, Grant Kirkpatrick, he's trying to spin out the first Department of Sustainability at the City of Stockton, which was unheard of 7 years ago. So yeah, just to say, it's the power of the ecosystem. We have to invest in the ecosystem, the partnerships, the leadership is what's durable. And then also to say, this work is for the long term. Right? We've been working together for 7 years. This is not a 1 to 2 year turnaround. It is about that deep investment in community that I think at all levels, federal on down, we have to start investing in.
Awesome.
Key. question for you, but I am actually gonna step one, like move a little bit away from you. That is why I'm telling you, do not be offended. I hope the sound works better now for you guys. Is it better? Yeah, okay, good. All right, here's my question. What are the key approaches and strategies to building readiness? What do we know is working to date with California's tribal context?
Well, I appreciate that question. And what I actually tend to do is rather than talk about the planes that land safely, we need to talk about the planes that crash. And I'm sorry, that's really depressing, but the reality is that for tribes, a lot of the time, the relationship with the federal government and with state government has been a plane crash. And we need to remember that there is a federal system within which tribes are embedded, not at their choice. And that federal system, people tend to think of it as being the federal government and the states, but there's a third leg to that, and that's the tribes. And the tribes actually are above the states because tribes are nations. They're independent.
That's right.
Did I turn myself up?
Yeah.
There we go. Tribes are independent sovereign nations. And so there is a level of difficulty in terms of being able to work with tribes for getting things started. And I think that the state of California is doing a lot better than it used to. Just as an example, the other day I had a phone call with Sarah Risher with SGC, and she was helping us. And she was helping us with our grant contract because Paula, on behalf of the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association, is a recipient of the new Regional Climate Collaborative grants. And we plan to do a lot with that money, and the state was flexible enough to work with us on that contract to make it easier for us to do the work that we need to do and take out some of those extra levels of reporting and kind of busy work, so that we can actually spend that time and money on doing what needs to be done for Southern California tribal nations. And then my hope is that that'll be a way to do the same thing for other tribes in California. Let's remember, there's 106 federally recognized tribal nations in California. There are dozens of non-federally recognized tribes that have relationships with the state. And as long as we continue to listen to tribal leaders and tribal representatives about what that sovereign relationship means, which really means that you've got to work with tribes as an equal and not as somebody or as a group that's subject to California's requirements, we're going to be able to do a lot more to bring tribes into the fold in doing this kind of work. And then finally, just keeping in mind that no matter where you go, thinking back to the wonderful land acknowledgement and explanation we had this morning when we started, it's not just that everywhere in California is tribal land, it's that everywhere in California is stolen land. And so let's keep that in mind. And if we do, then I think that those relationships are going to just continue to improve so that the state and the tribes can work together as equal partners.
Yeah, well, thank you, you guys. I mean, a few like snaps and cheers because there's a lot of truth telling there. Sheila, so we learned a little bit about California right now. Let's zoom back out to the federal level. And what is EPA thinking about in regards to the role of governments and other funders in pre-implementation phase and readiness building work?
So what we are doing is we are building new grant programs based on what we've heard through the years. As I mentioned, we started with a small grant program with the education, assessment. Then we moved up to the collaborative problem-solving grant program, where they're actually starting to be able to do some on-the-ground work, some larger scale assessment and planning. Until the IRA funding, we did not have the ability to fund programs that were in the implementation stage. So now we're really excited about that. And we have now just recently, in fact, we have two NOFOs, notice of funding opportunities out.
You guys know about these?
Don't you love the
big deal?
the bureaucratic names out for looking for applications. We've got the CPS, collaborative problem solving, Those grant opportunities are at 500K per application. And we realize that we've got some community groups, while they have great projects, they don't have the capacity to handle 500K. So there's an opportunity for smaller projects at the 150K. So that's out on the street now. And then we know that the communities need their partners, their state partners, their local community, local government partners. And so we also have a solicitation out now called G2G. And that means government to government, where we've heard in the past from our co-regulators, our states, our counties, oh, we'd love to do this work, but we don't have the resources. Oh, here are some resources. Now for our co-regulators, our federal, our state and county and city partners to get some funding, because they now have the interest and now they'll be able to get the resources to partner with the communities. All of these grant programs have a key component that has to be a community partner, a community commitment, because the projects need to be community led. You all, I'm preaching to the choir here. Because California has always been in the forefront. We've worked with Tacoma Beautiful in the past. We've awarded them grants, the Moving Forward Network, a lot of them we hear. And so we are really excited about these resources to be able to create grant programs to respond to what we have heard. So, and then we are just about ready to open up what we have named the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers. Because we know, headquarters or even an EPA regional office cannot be everywhere to offer technical assistance to communities. And to some extent, we're kind of limited to what the types of technical assistance we can provide as a government entity. However, if we have an organization on the ground in communities that are available to offer a wide range of technical assistance, whether it's helping a community develop the capacity to build their organization, or whether they need some particular technical expertise on an environmental, technical issue, then those technical centers are going to be available to communities. It's at no cost to the community. They just need to reach out to the center and say, this is what you need. So we are really working to take advantage of this huge infusion of resources to help support our communities. So that's where we are now. We are still in the process of working on our, it doesn't have an official name yet. We're calling it the mega grant. And so that is part of my purpose here, not only to share what we're doing, but also to get information from you all experts here in California as to what is working. And so we want to take all that valuable information and infuse it into that new grant program that we hope to have out in the late to mid-summer.
Wonderful. Well, I have a non-Hoover related set of audience engagement questions. Raise your hand if you fought for Build Back Better, what is now elements of the Inflation Reduction Act. Just raise your hand. Money, legacy, like historic funding for climate investments, never seen before across the country. Okay, now I'm going to tell you one thing. This biggest fear, having been a government administrator, is that that money gets left on the table and no one applies for it. So please, second round, raise your hand if you've heard of these programs that EPA just mentioned. Yeah? Okay, keep your hand up if you're going to either apply or help someone apply to get that money into your communities. Keep it up. Now wave it like this. Imagine that bills are falling down from the sky into your community. It is going to take a village to get this money drawn down to community. And so please do not leave this conference here without having established, here's your challenge, 3 to 4 relationships that are going to help you get money into your communities to lead and support your community visioning work. Okay, back to you, Felipe, bring us home here. Tell us about why it's important that funders and government commit to pre-readiness actions. What will happen if they don't?
I think in order for us to close the equity gaps, we need community participation, right? It's about community. Going back to TCC, we started, which is the people planning schools. But after that, we also did charrettes, workshops, meetings. We walked with the community. Everything was integrated with the community. And it was Become Beautiful, just like many other great local nonprofits here. We're intergenerational, right? So we don't just work with adults. We work with high school students. We are different clubs in the community. We also work with kids. So how do we bring the whole family together? So come back to the question, what we need is making sure, like, for regulators, right, it's about like shifting the culture and also system change, right? Making sure it's more flexible, specifically when it comes to those meetings, right? Like those meetings that we had getting ready for TCC, it was not free, right? We had to pay for the time, the venue, the food, and sometimes that can be a challenge, right? When, there's a grant and like you can't do food, right? Or you can't do translation, or, you can't do this or that. So we need more of that, like the investments to the capacity building as well. One of the things that we've done kind of right with Space, they did the capacity building with a program, and folks got like a stipend, right? Making sure that people get the time, also their time is compensated. We'll do something similar as well. We're starting a program where community members are going through a capacity building program, and they're getting stipend as well, because to help them out, right? Because we know our community right now is in crisis. So how do we make sure the funding is more flexible to do that, right? Not just pay for staff time, but pay for other staff. Like I know some of the new programs at SGC are doing that. And so I think that's gonna help close some of those equity gaps, and just making sure, like I said, I think the money just is more flexible, right? Because as we're doing organizing, for us, it's all like organizing, how do we do the online and offline organizing, because it's just not about just doing the door-to-door outreach, right? We know, I know in Pacoima, if I was to just door-to-door, there's a lot of dogs, there's the chickens running around, so sometimes the gates are closed, so it's really hard to get into the doors to talk to people. So we also need the funding to do other work, right? To get people to other means, like, text banking. We also do the digital ads, WhatsApp. Pacoima mostly Latino community immigrants, so a lot of people are on WhatsApp. So how do we use WhatsApp to like talk to people broadly and reach people? Mailers, right? So sometimes, right, with the funding, it's hard because we know how to do that, how to scale the work up, because again, like organizations are pretty small. Like our team is just 5 people. Pacoima is 100,000 people. So how do we talk to 100,000 people with just 5%? It's kind of difficult, right? So for us, how do we scale organizing efforts to get people to get into the door? And if that doesn't happen, I think what we're gonna be seeing is the imbalance of power that we see right now, right? Where the community doesn't have the power to drive the vision and also be at the table, so they can say, these are my needs. We need to meet these needs, right? So I think that's why it's important to have to fund preparations, because if not, we're gonna be continue to see this, right? With justice it's not just for our communities, and we still see this imbalance in power. And yeah, I think right now it's a good time. So I'm glad to hear stuff the EPA is doing about shifting the culture, and also systems change.
Yeah, thank you, Felipe. So you gave us a pretty good metaphor about, like, we're here to learn what it takes to fly the plane, but we also need to learn what it takes when the plane crashes. And you're like, who knows how to, make sure this plane doesn't hit the ground? I do want to end on a positive note about how the plane is going to fly. But Emmy, you are going to tell us about how to not crash the plane. So what are the challenges that you're going to see ahead in this work?
Way to set me up, Jesse. Yeah, I'm just gonna ride on kind of Felipe's coattails here, because I think everything he's saying is absolutely correct. When we look at the field, when we look at the needs, we see the need to invest in capacity building from 2 scales simultaneously. So we need to invest from the top down, and then we need to invest from the bottom up, right? And what that looks like for us is we need to, from the top down, we need to transform the behaviors, the institutions, the systems that disproportionately harm communities of color and under-resourced communities. So that's everything we're talking about here in terms of the funding. We need to fund the front line at a massive scale. There's a reason why our communities look the way they do. It's because of disinvestment. I think we're very excited about Justice 40. We're very excited about, federal legislation and the federal funding. And I think those of us who are tracking the funding are also, curious to see how much of that will actually be accessible to our communities. So there is still this need to fund the front lines. There's a need to invest in terms of like the what. It's both the planning side and the implementation side. So this readiness piece, community organizing, partnerships development, that is so foundational and needs to be supported. And then there also needs to be funding, that is community centered, intended for communities directly. Much of the funding that I think we see is intended for local governments, and are there ways to shift that to make it community centered? And then also removing a lot of the administrative barriers that Felipe talked about. So how can we better incentivize and allow resources to be used for stipends, for community engagement? California's advanced pay pilot is a step in the right direction. Thank you for that. But there's also so much more to be done. So we have to dismantle systems, right? And then from the bottom up, we need to, it's very simple, but also quite surprisingly challenging. We need to invest in community leadership. That looks like reversing the kinds of top-down planning inequities that we have seen and that have gotten us here. So investing in community decision-making, investing in collaborative governance, investing in that ecosystem of change I was talking about earlier, community anchors, technical assistance, the capacity of local governments to engage in equity. I think this is both the challenge, but also hopefully the opportunity ahead.
Great. So Lynn actually set us up this morning to say that, the conversation doesn't end today. There are going to be some policy papers that are coming out with recommendations from today's panelists, as well as from you guys. We're actually getting those recommendations through the Whova app. So please take out your phone now, because we want to know the one thing that you would like decision makers to take action on in regards to community readiness. I promise you what you write here today will be in some ongoing report that's going to decision makers. So please take the time to contribute. And while you're doing that, we are going to ask everyone to have a 1-minute closing statement about what you think the one consideration, action, and nugget about readiness is. And what you want the audience to be able to leave with, including all the virtual audience members who are joining us today. I see all you, wherever the camera is. So let's start with Shasta.
A nugget?
A nugget.
I feel like I need a boulder. There's so much, but let me gather my thoughts. And I'll tell you all, they did give us this question in advance, but I don't have an answer. I think, as far as tribes are concerned, it's mostly to remember what I said before, that no matter where you go, even if you're not on tribal reservation or trust land, you are on tribal land. And to keep that in mind when you do your pre-implementation work, that no matter where you are, no matter where you go, there's going to be a tribe who is concerned about what's happening in the place that you're doing your project, and reach out and do everything you can to establish those relationships.
And she said she wasn't ready. Emmy?
I'm just also trying to check all these great answers coming in. I think we have decision points in all the decisions that we're making, and there are a lot of folks with institutional power here, right? Who control money, who control resources, who control programs. And it's just a call to think about in every decision point, in every choice point that we have, who are we serving with this? Who's making the decisions? Who are we listening to? How can we shift all of that to shift to community self-determination so that communities have ownership over our own neighborhoods, so they're not repeating this pattern of our neighborhoods being planned from the outside? And that's the call.
Sheila?
Very well said. No, that I have much to add, other than perhaps readiness is needs to be thought about to scale. That all the points of readiness are applicable to every organization. However, you may need to look at it to scale of that organization.
And Felipe?
I would say implementation takes time, right? You can't do it overnight, especially because we need to build trust speaking from our community, right? My dad, he's from El Salvador, so he came running from the Civil War. My mom's from Guatemala, so she came running away from poverty, where there's a lot of corruption. And the same thing resonates with a lot of community members where I work with. So when I talk about funding, the government, they're like, I don't want to deal with the government. You know, the streets here are dirty. The parks are, the restaurants are not good. Like, why should I get involved, right? So we're just building the trust. Like, you know, like we know it's a lot of trauma, right? So you know, that's the other thing, right? You know, how do we trust and how do we heal, right? Because there's a lot of trauma in our community. So it's about, you know, healing, building trust to move forward together and continue to do the capacity building that we need to do and just doing it together, right? But I would say, yeah, it's just making sure, like, you know, you take your time. You can't rush the process. Because if you should rush the process, people are gonna feel like it's not being intentional, it's just transactional. So it's just about making sure, like, you know, we're building trust, and also we need to heal because there's so much trauma in our communities.
Great. And I'm going to just step back a little so I can actually read some of your comments from the audience. We have fund the backbone entities that help to coordinate across sectors and stakeholders, especially frontline communities. Climate resilient education, coordination of rollout of funding opportunities, supporting capacity building, tools for building trust, fix who can afford to go to meetings and get information in a different way. Fund all aspects of work from capacity building, technical assistance, planning, implementation, and administration. Follow community-based organizations to incorporate higher overhead rates into budgets, right? This kind of, and my nugget is, this requires some serious bureaucratic ninja work. I was like, if anyone grew up in social movements, I feel like nobody taught you to be a bureaucratic ninja. And so I'm going to tell you today, before we end, we are going to do our bureaucratic ninja pose. And so think of what your bureaucratic ninja pose is going to be. Appropriate, respectful tribal consultation, supporting federal grant applications, funding your most underserved first. So are you ready? I asked you to think of your ninja pose. So please stand up, everybody, in your seats, wherever you are. Panelists, you too. All right. Stand up. All right. Imagine your most fierce ninja pose. For you government workers out there who are doing inside-outside strategy, your bureaucratic ninja pose. At the count of 3, we're all going to move into it. Ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you, everybody.
Nice.
All right, can we get one more round of applause for this incredible panel? When Jessie was my supervisor, I was lucky enough to be able to give up coffee because she kept me up every single morning. But what an incredible panel. You all heard feedback. I heard church bells. Thank you all again. What an incredible and understandably packed morning. We were welcomed by Jess's beautiful tribal acknowledgement and land acknowledgement. We were welcomed by the governor and our executive director, Lynn Von Koch-Liebert. We were encouraged to think about innovation and deep, deep, deep community partnership and transformation by Keita and Randall. And then Pastor Booker and Karthik helped us think about the next 100 years and how we have to be building on what we've already built. So just thank you to our incredible panelists and speakers this morning. Before I welcome you to a great next session, I'm not going to say what it is because everybody's going to leave the room. I wanted to just cover what's coming up for the rest of the day. We won't be reconvening back into this room until the very, very end. After lunch, we are going to be breaking up into breakout groups. There's going to be 2 sets of breakout groups back to back. If you're not sure what breakout group you're in or what room to attend, either speak to Emily at the help desk or check out your Whova app. Within the My Agenda tab, you'll have more information about what breakout group you're going to be in. And just to underscore why we're going into breakout groups, these aren't more panel discussions. This is where every single one of your voices will be contributing to the conversation, understanding your experience, the work that you're currently doing. How do we build the best And then how do we get there? And so that's what really the generative conversation we're looking for this afternoon is. So with that, I want to, maybe one last note is we're getting our hands slapped a little bit by folks. Please don't bring food back into the room. Enjoy it outside. And then lastly, while you're enjoying lunch, networking, be sure to check out our art installation. It's a live art demo. There's a garden tub walk outside if you're willing to brave the cold, which is highlighting some incredible work around California. And then just take the time to get to build partnership and community with one another. So with that, I want to ask you to all to enjoy lunch. Thanks.